I am Ari Melber in for Lawrence O'Donnell tonight, and we have a lot of news, believe it or not, even though it is a holiday season. Today, in the face of bipartisan criticism following the resignation of his defense secretary, President Trump did something that many people have been waiting for, something you've probably heard Lawrence talk about previously. He made his first ever visit as a U.S. president to American troops in a war zone. That was today. The president and the first lady making a surprise appearance to visit U.S. soldiers in Iraq at the Al-Assad Air Base. The president also visited American troops in Germany during a stop on the way home. Now, in Iraq, Trump talked foreign policy to the soldiers on the ground. He took the chance to make a public pitch for the very controversial way that he hastily announced the withdrawal from Syria, a move widely seen as benefiting Russia and sparking the departure of his defense secretary.
I said, go get him. We need 6 months. Go get him. Then they said, give us another 6 months. I said, go get him. Then they said, can we have one more, period of 6 months? I said, nope. I said, I gave you a lot of 6 months, and now we're doing it a different way. America shouldn't be doing the fighting for every nation on earth, not being reimbursed in many cases at all. If they want us to do the fighting, they also have to pay a price. And sometimes that's also a monetary price. So we're not the suckers of the world. We're no longer the suckers, folks.
No longer the suckers. Let's be clear and break this down. Part of what you just heard there actually does have a long precedent in American debates over foreign policy, the idea that the U.S. shouldn't necessarily always police the world. Okay. And part of it is a new and chaotic feature of this particular president's leadership. Military decisions made on the fly, justified after the fact in harsh and even sloppy terms, with these public hints that, yes, it's worse than it looks, because some of the experts closest to the president are the most concerned. You ever wonder what they've seen that maybe we don't know yet? Because we know something led to Defense Secretary Mattis's resignation, just as something else led Trump to quickly take back his announced plan that Mattis would continue on for 2 more months. Now, it's been, as I was just mentioning with Joy, a busy Christmas with a shutdown, with market jitters. But remember, it was just last week that Trump claimed Mattis will be retiring with distinction at the end of February. A statement made before President Trump bothered to even read General Mattis's resignation letter. According to reporting in the New York Times, Trump only came to understand what had even happened after days of news coverage recounting how Mattis had issued the stinging rebuke of Mr. Trump over his neglect of allies and tolerance of authoritarians. The president grew increasingly angry as he watched a parade of defense analysts go on, yes, TV, to extol Mattis's bravery, until he decided Sunday he had had enough. On Sunday, the president tweeting, Mattis will instead be gone starting, yes, Happy New Year, January 1st, 2019, which brings us to this acting administration we're living through. Now, Deputy Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan is the acting Secretary of Defense. He's a former Boeing executive, has no stated military experience. Trump saying today in Iraq he's actually not in any hurry to name a permanent defense chief, and that Secretary Shanahan, quote, could be there for a long time. The president also used the opportunity to briefly stoke fears about how long the ongoing shutdown will last.
How long do you think the shutdown will last, Mr. President?
Whatever it takes. I mean, we're going to have a wall. We're going to have safety.
President Trump unlikely to get his wall, according to who controls Congress as we head into January. But the uncertainty President Trump has caused at home and abroad has led to a pair of high-profile pieces this weekend by people who apparently can't wait any longer. They want the world to know they view the current president as a, quote, threat to the country. One from a former Obama National Security Advisor, we all remember, Susan Rice. The other from a less senior official, but one who has a potentially bright political future, according to many Democratic insiders. That's Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Let's start with his. You need to see this if you haven't yet. He writes, what's happening now is part of a larger threat to us all. My fear is that we will choose certainty, strength, and predictability over this constant dysfunction, even if it comes at the price of our democracy. If there were ever a man to exploit this precarious moment for our country and for our form of government, it's Trump. Now, you might say, well, okay, but that's a politician. And politicians, they make all kinds of attacks on other politicians. All right. But now, again, against the backdrop of this change of leadership of a defense secretary departing, Susan Rice, writing in the New York Times, this is a person who's never been a politician and isn't to this day. The headline, take a look. Quote, the threat in the White House. And she writes, quote, this president couldn't care less about facts, intelligence, military analysis, or the national interest. He refuses to take seriously the views of his advisors, announces decisions on impulse, disregards the consequences of his actions, and abandoning the role of a responsible commander-in-chief. Mr. Trump today does more to undermine American national security than any foreign adversary. If she means what she says as a former national security advisor, that cuts ice. Now, all of this foreign policy uncertainty comes amid another piece of news. As I said, there is a lot going on around the world. Nuclear saber rattling from Russian President Vladimir Putin, claiming today that Russia has now successfully tested a missile that can carry a nuclear warhead at 5 times the speed of sound and which will be formally added to Russia's arsenal next year. Putin calling it a, quote, wonderful, perfect New Year's gift, a public belligerence on the world stage that does stand undeniably against the backdrop of President Trump pulling U.S. troops out and retreating from Russia's ally, Syria. Let's get into it with some more experts. Malcolm Nance, an MSNBC counterterror and intelligence analyst, also former Republican Congressman David Jolly from Florida, and Eleanor Clift, a columnist for the Daily Beast and a panelist from the McLaughlin Group, and as I like to call her, Swellenor. Not my term, but I'm always happy to use it, Eleanor.
Thank you.
That's a brief moment of lightness against what is Malcolm Nance. Pretty dark statements from people who, I'll speak as a journalist, I'm curious your view as a former intelligence official, people who aren't known, Susan Rice, to pop off politically at all. What do you think is driving her, and do you agree with her assessment?
Well, what's driving her into this very dire, stark assessment are the facts that we can see before our very eyes. Donald Trump, as president, taken a tact to where he believes the fundamental security underpinnings of this nation that have been established in blood from the time that we entered World War II, that those fundamental underpinnings, NATO, the Atlantic alliance between Washington and the European capitals, maintaining stability throughout the Western and Eastern hemispheres, they should go away. He believes the United States should not be a force for good through the advancement of democracy. He fundamentally believes that autocracy, the way that it's run by his partner, Vladimir Putin, should be the operating method for the way the United States will advance in the future, which means you must get rid of NATO. He's actually hinted that he wanted the United States to withdraw at one point. You must get rid of national security and financial trade alliances. And he doesn't believe in anything we've believed in 243 years. So, of course, Ambassador Rice is right. The man does not believe in what America stands for. He believes in an alternate reality America in which it would be very comfortable in some other universe where fascism rules.
Eleanor, how do you distinguish between what the president may be drawing on, which, as I mentioned, has roots in avoiding conflicts abroad and in what some call isolationism, and the rest of it that Malcolm and Susan Rice and others are associating themselves with the critique that he's actually becoming a threat itself to the nation, and contrast that against what the president would claim, and we always report his side of the story as well. He says, oh, now, well, Saudi Arabia is agreeing to spend the necessary money needed for Syria, so isn't it nice, he says, quote, when the wealthy countries help rebuild?
He's taking a very simplistic approach to foreign policy, and you can hear him echoing probably talk in Joe's bar down the street. You know, all these other countries are taking advantage of us. You know, Donald Trump is going to make them pay up. He's talking like the real estate guy from New York who's, you know, rebuilding Woburn Ice rink in Central Park and trying to get a better deal. You know, I've given them 6 months notice, told them that's enough. We don't want to be suckers anymore. I think it's appealing again to his base, and God knows I've heard so much of his base and the catering to his base. But it's the kind of approach to foreign policy, I think, that people who don't want to look at the complexities of the American role in the world, it's the approach they would take. And then to deny Secretary Mattis that last 2 months, when he would have attended a meeting, a NATO meeting, where he would have served as basically a bulwark against Russia, to have the acting Secretary of Defense attend, who is basically a procurement officer. I mean, he understands buying and selling planes and budgeting. He's not a strategist. He may be a very good person, but he's not somebody who can stand up to the president or who can articulate the strategy and the values that this country has built up over certainly the last 7 decades. And this president is squandering the collective goodwill that he certainly didn't earn, and he wants everyone to believe that he alone can fix it. I mean, it's the authoritarian form of government, and it's why he gets along so well with the Turkish president.
And Congressman, as Eleanor says, the acting secretary is just that, another acting official who doesn't yet have the constitutionally required support of the Senate that a long-term chief would, adds to the acting chief of staff and the acting attorney general. As someone who used to be in that co-equal branch of Congress, do you view that as also problematic?
Of course, all the acting secretaries, those who are answering to the president as a yes person. And I think the concern, the anxiety of congressional leaders, but also Americans across the country is, do we need a check for the president's malfeasance, for these untoward leanings and this love connection he has with authoritarians, like Malcolm said? Or is it simply his incompetence? And what I mean by that is Republicans were happy to criticize President Obama for leading from behind. That was a narrative that many of us, myself included, expressed concerns about for the vacuum created in places like Syria because we didn't enter soon enough. The president's decisions to withdraw, though, if Obama was arguably leading from behind, Donald Trump has taken it to a whole new level. He's being led by a leash, on a leash. And the question is why, and to whom is he answering? But if nothing else, if it's his own ego, what is he doing that is jeopardizing the men and women that he visited today? Because there's a level of incompetence.
I take it you're getting at the idea that in domestic politics, he's leading by retweet, and in foreign policy, you're saying leading by a leash that extends where? To the Kremlin?
Well, certainly you can make that argument, right? To Malcolm's point, is he flirting with authoritarians? But also, if you just set that aside, there's a level of incompetence. There truly is. I mean, there were legitimate foreign policy decisions that Republicans disagreed with President Obama. But with Donald Trump, there's an incoherence with foreign policy that even Republican leaders can't understand and don't know how to confront.
Malcolm, the other piece tonight that I wanted to share for your analysis, and I was reading up on this in a story that already in print quoted you, so I know you've been following it, is a Newsweek report that Donald Trump, through this visit, and everyone thinks the president visiting the troops, however long it took him to get there, is a positive thing, but how you do it matters. It says here, Trump and the White House communications team revealed a U.S. Navy SEAL team was deployed to Iraq after the president's secret trip. It notes a Pool report, that's, the media reports we have, said the details of the trip were, of course, embargoed until the finishing of the remarks. It was about 100 U.S. Special Ops troops. The Pool report went on to say Trump paused to take a selfie with a U.S. Navy lieutenant commander who said he was a chaplain for the SEAL Team 5. The chaplain said Trump told him, hey, in that case, let's take a picture. After Trump left Iraqi airspace, the president posts a video of his Twitter account showing them posing for pictures with the service members that appear to be from SEAL Team 5. In your view, is this compromising operational security? And how does this happen?
Well, it happens because Donald Trump says it happens. Donald Trump has compromised operational security of many missions. The thing is, there's just so many, it occurs almost weekly. Most importantly, when he compromised an extraordinarily covert operation that the Israelis were carrying around in Syria to their enemies, to the Russians, the people who would be there helping Assad thwart that operation. It's just mindless. And Representative Jolly talked about incompetence. They are incompetent. And they're incompetent because they don't care about what the rules are. Look, I lived under, operational security clearances and protected status for a quarter of a century. And the one thing that I would never, ever want to do is get near a photograph, whether it's publicity or something else, for anyone who holds a top secret SCI security clearance. But President Trump rolls in. Everybody wants to be accommodating. And even though that unit was probably part of the Joint Special Operations Task Force that's training the Iraqis, they engage with ISIS all the time. And should they be captured, they will be exploited. Because all they have to do is say, look, here's you with the commander-in-chief. Clearly, you're a SEAL. So the commanding officers of those SEAL platoons should have had a quiet meet and greet off inside their sensitive compartmented information facility. And the president and his staff should have thought, I will not exploit the SEAL teams. One last point. President Bush had a photograph of himself taken with Gold Squadron of SEAL Team 6. They digitized their faces out. In this, they just jumped in front of the cameras, and the White House put it out on their video feed.
Eleanor, do you think if Barack Obama made this sort of operational security mistake, it would be treated as a big political and media scandal?
Of course it would. But again, this president treats foreign policy like it's a financial transaction. Are we getting our money's worth? And he was really frustrated that he had to make this secure landing in Iraq, all the lights out. And I think he wants to be greeted with rose petals or something, because he thinks we've spent, I think he used the phrase, $1 trillion, that we've spent all this money there, and we have to go in under this kind of security. He was asked if he had second thoughts about going, and he said, well, he had second thoughts about going when he learned what he would have to go through to get there. So again, there's an ignorance of how government works, an ignorance of the complexities of foreign policy, and if he's not getting his money's worth, and he acts like every dollar is coming out of his pocket. And maybe that's a good thing that he'd pay careful attention. But again, he relies, his principal advisor is his gut. And I look around the government and I don't see too many other people offering sound advice. And it's not very comforting to know that we have a president who has no process in place, which is why a picture like that could be posted. I'm sure nobody thought twice about it. We need a government where there's more attitude, analysis, complexity, not a government that operates on the whim of one man. Even when his gut makes the right decision, and sometimes it does, and I do think that it is time to rethink how long we've been in Syria, how long we've been in Afghanistan. But you don't just decide one day, okay, I'm bringing everyone home. And at the same time, you've just sent 3 times as many troops to the southern border for a non-existent caravan, a mythical caravan, 3 times what you had in Syria, where they actually were doing serious work and the strategy was paying off. So he's what we've got, and I guess we can keep on criticizing him, but there's a price to pay for his media reaction. I think Secretary Mattis is gone because he was frustrated that Mattis was getting so much good news. So he gets good people, and they get good reviews, and then they're out of there, which is why he's staffing his government with all these actings, easier to get rid of.
Well, it's very interesting listening to some of the experience and insights each of you offer. I can't say I feel better, but I feel informed. And I'm just sharing with you my honest emotional reaction to what you've shared with me. What I'm going to do is fit in a break. So my special thanks to Malcolm Nance and Eleanor Clift.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.